were highly recommended as somebody that would be able to tell us about climate cafes, and there were several people here last time um, who were either planning to do one or very interested in doing one. And so I think, if you can help get us started, um,
Sure.
we hope to get people interested in giving this a try in their local town. So thank you
Yeah.
for joining me tonight.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's great to hear that there's interest and that there's recognition for the name Climate Cafe, because I feel like some people still aren't totally sure what that is. So I am the director of CHICS, which is the Climate and Health Initiative for Caregivers and Kids, and now is a part of NH Healthy Climate, or New Hampshire Healthy Climate, but that was New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action. And I found out about the organization about over a year ago, and the Climate Cafe program hadn't begun there. But I attended a conversation with a woman named Elizabeth Bouchard, who works with Moms Clean Air Force. And it was the first time that somebody had asked me how I was doing in all of this. Like as a parent specifically, how is my mental health? Like, how is the load of raising a child with all of this fear of the future? And that was the first time that I had really anybody had asked me, and I had been given the opportunity to share my thoughts, and it was really helpful for me. So I followed up with Elizabeth, and I just started asking her a lot of questions. How can I do this? How can we make this into something that we can duplicate? And she taught me, or I guess directed me to the Climate Cafe model, which I believe started in the UK, and now has been sort of moving throughout the world, I guess. It's taking off in the US and different places. And CHICS to this point has we've had four now. We just had our last one over the weekend in Bradford, and we had about 12 people take part in that. And we also had some children's programming at the same time. And we've been focusing on parents and caregivers and grandparents. So basically anybody who has an vested interest in children in the future. And this one in particular, we had a lot of intergenerational conversation, which was really great. So we're trying to move that forward, but anybody can do this with any age group, any demographic, and it's still a great conversation. So what I can do, I think, in this time is just run through a little bit. What I did is I put a lot of the I want to say the instructions for or the outline for a cafe down in a PowerPoint, which can be shared and replicated. So I will let me see. I can share that with you. We practiced this, but I can actually do it. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So this obviously, we just got the new name. We're getting the new logo. Signal time's a little bit out of date, but this is just a little header. All right, so here's the presenting. What is a climate cafe? There's a lot of definitions in different places, but for our purpose, it's really a safe space for exploring thoughts, feelings, and experiences around climate change. The idea is that it's not a medical space. It's not a scientific space. It's really just a safe space to discuss these feelings with other people, bounce ideas off people. And for me, our focus has been community building, because since COVID, I hear over and over again that people are feeling disconnected from others. They don't have the opportunity to like physically be with somebody. And you can do these online, but being around somebody is particularly other people is particularly powerful. So it's designed to take you away from your daily life, daily chaos, have a safe, peaceful place, an hour and a half long, where it's just about how you're feeling and how others are feeling. And in this day and age, that's pretty unusual. So just taking that time as a person to focus on yourself and focus on your emotions is very powerful. And then choosing to talk about climate and how that's been a part of your life and how you've been thinking about it too is something very unique and helps lead to some interesting conversation. So when we get started, the way we've been doing it is the first time we had people come when the cafe was supposed to start. Do not do this because people always come late, and then once you do the introductions, then like there's a late person who comes in. So the last time we did it, we had the event start at 2 and the cafe started at 2:30. And that allowed people to come in, get drinks, some snacks, get comfortable. Where we had it last time was a beautiful place. They got to enjoy the environment for a little bit, and we had child care, so some people will drop their children off. So, it's important in the beginning just to acknowledge people with the welcome. Like, it's amazing you're here. Thank you. It takes a lot of courage to take time out of your day, especially if you have people you're caring for, to come take care of yourself. And then, you know, I usually co-facilitate with either Elizabeth or my friend Michelle with NAMI New Hampshire. And we introduce ourselves very quickly. Sometimes, depending on the group, we talk about why we decided to do this and what brought us here, why we care about climate. And then we kind of ask people, like, has anybody had heard of a climate cafe before? Like, have you been to one? Usually no one says yes or raises their hand. So it's kind of cool that this is the first time often for many people. And then we, like I said before, when I introduced before, we kind of talk about what it is a climate cafe is, and really emphasize the fact that, this people are not alone in feeling overwhelmed by this. And in doing so, helping these people feel comfortable about feeling that overwhelm and help, encouraging them to take this opportunity to share. So there are some rules. There are a lot of rules, actually. Elizabeth created all of these, and yep.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry, this is so rude. Someone is trying to get on, Ann Podlipny, because I know she wanted to be here. She just called me. John, in chat, I gave you her number to text her and tell her what is the number to get on this call by phone. Sorry, I have multiple disruptions from me.
That's okay. So these rules really are just things that are just common sense, but they're important to put out there, especially that this is a confidential group, that you can, and I've done this, you can take anecdotes from the conversation to share with others, but names don't leave the room. For me, the one I've always talked about is the experience of having a couple, like two people who are a couple, join us, and watching them share their thoughts, and you could kind of tell that they hadn't really even shared them with each other yet. So it was like a very supportive experience to watch them go through this and support each other in that. So that was an anecdote that I would share, but not say who they were. One thing that's really important is, if somebody says something that you find offensive, like a microaggression, you can say, like, you can respond by saying, ouch, and just call attention to the fact that didn't feel good, so that you don't have to suffer, if something makes you uncomfortable. And, we do have a line here about taking care of yourself and your children. If you do have children who are in childcare or elsewhere, if you need to step away from the group for a moment, get something to drink, or the bathroom, don't feel guilty. That's totally fine. And then we also ask people at the end if there are any other agreements that they'd like to mention. And if that's the case, we can add to the list. We usually have it written up on a big board. So at this point, we transition to the cafe, and a lot of times people are feeling a little shy or antsy at this point. So we list the first round is really easy. It's just getting people to kind of open up. And we've had experiences doing this different ways. Usually in the first round, we do go around the circle and ask people to share this first round. And we've done name, pronouns, where you live, if you have children or grandchildren. And then we have done a nice prompt where you ask somebody to say, like, what's something you love about being alive in the world? And that is such a unexpected thing for someone to ask you. And it really gets people to kind of smile and think for a minute. Some people will talk about their children. Some people will talk about their grandchildren. Others will talk about enjoying walking on the beach in the morning or walking in the woods, lots of different ideas. And this kind of gets people thinking and opening up. And also gives everybody the opportunity to find out where everybody's from, which is always kind of fun. And it is great to do this with two facilitators. You can do it with one, but with two, you have the opportunity to work together with different styles. For example, I'm more outgoing, more of an extrovert, and I enjoy leading off. And then my facilitator is great at bringing everybody together and saying the things that kind of calm the group down. I don't know if that's the right way, but like close the conversation in a nice way. She summarizes things well, and we kind of work off each other's styles. So once you've gone around the circle, you can have that last person close, and then you really start getting into the climate stuff. And which we say that at that point, we're going to start talking about climate change. And with a simple prompt, what is it like for you to live in the shadow of climate change? You can different variations of that. What's it like to be a grandparent or a parent in time of climate change? We invite people to share their stories about when they became aware of climate change or when they first started to understand what it might mean for them or their family. And once you have that out there, you have one of the facilitators open. Again, that's usually me, where I say, my experience of when I first became really aware, started to care. And at this point, you can decide if you want to go around the circle or if you just want to invite people to share at their own pace. I see the merits of both. When you're going around, the first person is kind of like, uh, they have to be on right away, but it also gets everybody to share a different perspective. The last time we did it, we didn't go around the circle, and that was nice as well. So for me, my experience is moving back to New Hampshire after being away for a number of years. And when I was a child living here, being outside was a big part of that experience. And my memory is living in my grandparents' house. They only had one air conditioner, and it rarely was turned on. If it was a big deal. I can still remember the feeling of when it was on because it was so rare, and now we have four in our house and we can't live without it. So coming back, experiencing that, and then experiencing it as a parent and realizing the change was very real and that I was witnessing it and starting to wonder what that meant for my son. So that's the story I usually share. And then once you go around the group, my host or co-host, co-facilitator will kind of bring the group back, close with her own story, and thank people for sharing, and just sort of ask people, as we move on, did something come up in you when you heard that? Like, do you have a reaction to what somebody just said? And that gives people another opportunity to share how they were impacted by that. And then the next one, it's another opportunity to keep that conversation going. It's sort of the same, saying like, was there something that you wanted to comment on? Did something new come up for you in this conversation? Sometimes it's connecting people who are making similar thoughts and helping them to expand on that revelation or idea that they've spoken about. Like, as I note here, if time is running short, this round may just be a handful of shares. And the last one, we really spent a lot of time on the second and third ones, and really had to keep an eye on the clock because it was going pretty quickly. But we made sure to sort of begin closing with a new prompt, which was, what gives you hope? Because there will inevitably be a lot of negativity um, as people start talking about what they're afraid of and what they've noticed. But it's really very helpful for the mood and the direction we're hoping to go to start talking about positive things and hopeful things. So I would recommend, as you're looking to close, to start talking about things that are happy that you're seeing. There is a lot of good good news out there, which is hard to believe on a day like today. But people are making progress and they're coming together. I often talk about the community I've found in the climate movement, being able to meet people who are energized and are doing great work. It's also important to take that positive note when you're talking to children. And that's something that we talked about in some of our cafes. Like, how do you talk to kids about this? Well, you really have to focus on not only the science, but the progress and help them to understand that this is possible to right this wrong and to work together towards something. So the last part of it, as you're ending the cafe, it is nice to shift it to positivity. And then with about 10 minutes left, the facilitator acknowledges that we are coming to a close. Michelle is great at this. She keeps track of people who haven't spoken, and she asks them, would you like to share? We haven't said anything. Is there anything on your mind? Because some people do. I don't know what this is like. It's not me, but some people do kind of stay quiet in these conversations, and it's nice to find out what they have to say, especially because it's very likely they were listening closely. We then go through and kind of reflect on the conversation, summarize the feelings and themes, and really thank people for coming, and reinforcing what it takes to use your time in this way, especially for people who are really busy. I remember the ones we had up in Norwich in December. It was a Saturday in December, and there were a million things that people could be doing. It's the Christmas season, you've got kids, there's activities, and people chose to be there. And we were really grateful for that. So reminding people they're investing in themselves, their family's future, and thank them for that. And then, the whole point, the thing about cafes is you're really not supposed to be leading people into any kind of action. People will talk about different ways that they're interested in getting involved, and that's great. That's part of the positivity and the hope. For us, we say we will follow up with an email with resources, keeping people in touch because they have been engaged in this way. And that's part of our next phase with Chicks and NH Healthy Climate, is finding how to take these people who do want to be a part of something else and directing them in the right, pointing them in the right direction, I should say. So this is when we have a lot more time. I've asked people to introduce themselves, tell us where you're from, something you love about being alive. And another one was, why does climate action matter to you? But I can use this time now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Patsy, I think your hand's up.
Hi, Maria.
Hi.
I have a question about timing, because I think in Keene we go 2 rounds and everybody speaks for 1 minute. There's a lot of people there. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you do not do that. So what do you do with the person that goes on and on and on? Or how do you handle that if you're not using a timer?
Right. So, to this point, we've been doing them, been capping them at 15 people. I know there are different models out there. Like, from what I understand about the ones you've been doing at Keene, they're a little different in that you have a presentation as well. Is that true? This one
Yes.
is just focused on the conversation. So that does, when you say you've got an hour and a half, it's an hour and a half for talking, which does give that option. And I'm like, we're honestly, I don't think there's a right way to do it. Like we're thinking about ones where we present and then have the conversation. Like there are lots of different ways to do it. Just with this model, that it has been solely focused on people speaking. So we do have the folks that kind of go on and on, but it's more of a trying to shush. I don't know. Michelle's pretty good at this. Like, jump in at the right point in the conversation to try to redirect to somebody else. But it's not as much of a problem, I would say, with this model.
Okay, thanks.
Maria, I had my hand up, but I want to cede to Susan because my question can come actually at the end, is not so much about the content of what you just presented. So Susan, go ahead. Oh, but you're on mute, Susan.
What
want to miss any
what
of
do
your
you
words.
do with great globs of, big black holes of negativity? Like when someone says, I am furious.
We have planned for when people are negative or overly or sometimes denying what's going on. And that's another great reason to have two people, because you can invite that person to the side and say, like, hey, let's talk this out, if there's something else, and it, try to really understand what's behind their thoughts. Like, I'm not a trained therapist, but my co-facilitator is, and that's a great person to have because she's done a lot of this kind of work in terms of being outside of climate. And if it were an actual situation that were a threat, I think she would know if we had to report that. But I will say, like, some of these heavy feelings do come up, and what we've done is just given them the space to talk about them. And some people will agree, like, to varying degrees. Like, I'm really mad too, or like, I wish I could blow something up. And usually just talking through that helps to at least de-escalate the initial extreme thought, because that kind of talk also upsets other people in the group. So having them say out there, and if that's the most extreme part of it, you can just kind of put your hand up and say, and if someone's offended by it, that could be an ouch as well, and try to say, like, there have been some serious thoughts presented. I want to respect them and give them the weight, but I also recognize they might be upsetting. Is there a reason you feel this strongly? Giving them that moment. And then if it becomes something that clearly could upset everybody, it would be that other facilitator taking them to the side and having that conversation, kind of to diffuse it, because it is a group conversation and one person shouldn't be able to just, upset everyone else.
Okay, a book I admire, Reinmar knows it. Like that's the solution, not quite a lot of climate terrorism. And so that's a fantasy, but
Right.
it's one solution.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't have a clean stopping point. Okay, sorry I brought that up, but
No,
I
that's
just,
okay. No, it's
Yeah.
it's important. It's important to be ready for everything. The one we've been talking a lot about is what if you get a negative person who doesn't believe in it, who shows up, and that could also be upsetting. So again, letting them kind of have that, opportunity to say what they say, and then try to get behind why, like, for me, it's been understanding that most of these people who get so upset about it are just afraid, deep down afraid of something. And once I learned that, I was like, okay, I can handle a lot of this more. I don't get angry. I just kind of feel bad for them, and I want to help them, like, work through and try to understand, like, what brought them to take time out of their day to come, storm a nice group of peaceful people.
I actually would like to follow up on that. I teach, and I have had the experience of only one time actually of a student who was basically not, was a climate denier, basically. Although I think her husband actually was. I don't think she was so much, but she was on board, and it was quite a challenge because I had two choices. Either I could go into that and talk about it with her, in class, which would then take up a vast amount of time potentially, and also sort of disturb other people, partly because in order to really uh, counter that, you have to get into the weeds in a way that people aren't necessarily aware of. I mean, some of the technical stuff you have to talk about because
Mhm.
generally they'll be forwarding somewhat quasi-technical arguments and so forth. So in this context, I'm wondering what your plan would be for that, because you could easily take up an hour and a half, or at least an hour, talking about that. What have you thought about that?
Well, it's really, I mean, our approach has been separating them from the group, not,
Mm.
spending that time that would waste everybody else's time. Because those people don't need to hear all that. And it's often people don't even want to listen to it, the people who are making the argument. So it's kind of wasting everyone else's time, to kind of take part in that charade. So I've learned that it's not one conversation. It can be, where someone sees the light, but many times it's over and over. It's chipping away, helping people to gradually understand the reality of what's happening, and where you're probably not gonna win them over in that one cafe.
No, definitely not. And most of them have lots of loyalties to family or to
Right.
community that would prevent that from ever happening anyway.
Yeah.
One other little question that I have is, I guess, part of the NH Healthy Climate.
Mhm.
Uh, what are you a healthcare worker, I presume? In what
No,
capacity?
I'm not.
No? Oh,
I am not. So my program is not directly healthcare workers. It's more focused on children's health and
mm,
doing the cafes and helping to implement our curriculum to different schools and after school programs and settings. So no, I'm just like a director who helps with the program, but everybody else on our board are medical professionals, and we have an advisory board as well. And the people who go out and speak often are doctors or nurses.
mm, great. Thanks.
Catherine, and then I'll have to just jump.
I agree 100% with not encouraging a climate denier conversation. I'm recently, and John can probably speak to this better than I can, but CCL is having climate conversations. And I've noticed for quite a while that people in my family and circle don't ever talk about it. It's
Mhm.
almost like it's a taboo topic. So I was really happy to see CCL bringing conversations to the forefront, and another reason why I joined this too. And I think it is a much finer line when you're talking about people that truly feel the end of the world is
Mhm.
near. And there isn't a platform for folks to talk about that. People shut that down. So to be able to listen, I liked what you said about people in the group trying to have compassion for those people. And violence, certainly killing the governor, is not something that we would want to hear.
Yeah.
And violence is one thing that's sort of stepping over the line. But
Yeah.
I do think it's important to really let people voice those things because they have no other place to find that support. And they're looking at their children and saying, my child may be part of extinction. They're that serious about what's going on. There are other people that think, oh, it's going to be solved and it's going to be a little rough for a while. And so there's a lot of really deep feelings, pretty tough to moderate, I think.
It is, and I'll say I usually I have to stop myself from crying at least once. I mean, it's heavy to hear, and it brings up feelings, especially when children are involved. So yeah, it's just like, for me, it's therapeutic too, and I'm always exhausted afterwards because not only are you feeling your feelings, but you're taking on other people's emotions. So I do have to run because my son is calling, but my
Thank you so
email.
much, Maria.
Yeah, my email, I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, I think this was very valuable, and it is having conversations and normalizing, making it socially acceptable to talk about climate change is so important. We have to undo decades of what the fossil fuel industry has done to manipulate us to make polluting with fossil fuels socially normalized and talking about the problem taboo. And so I think this is a really important step. So thanks
Yeah,
for
and let me know if I
considering.
can, if I can help, email me, and I can share those slides too. But yeah, well, thank you. This is great. Like, I'm so excited that people are interested. If we could just spread this around, and
Yep,
have people have these conversations, it'll be great.
we'll put it on our New Hampshire Network website. And thanks so
Yeah,
much for your time, Maria.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so for the second half of the meeting, it's a free-for-all. We can talk about how we're going to set up climate cafes in our towns, I guess, or whatever you want.
It would be great if the slides could be shared too with the
Yes, she said she would share them and I'll put them on the website also. I agree. Those were good. Yeah, I was kind of chomping at the bit though at the talk about they try not to talk about actions people can take because the first part of well the whole climate cafe discussion seemed like what Citizens Climate Lobby tries to do in kind of the first third of a climate advocate workshop training, which is connect with people and find shared values and then inspire them to action and give them actions to do is kind of the second bit, which I think is so important for people. Action is the antidote to despair. So if somebody is really upset about it, giving them things that make them feel like they can make a positive difference, I think, a really important part of talking about it. So, Patsy, did you do these in Keene? Do they talk about solutions at all at the end of the ones that you've been to?
Um, it just depends on who's there. And I would say most of the time, most of the people that are there are involved some way in taking action already, but not all of them. And because there's a speaker, I think the speaker would then encourage people to action. I don't know why Maria said that that isn't the goal for what she's doing. Maybe have to ask her a little bit more later.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so difficult because, I have lots of friends that are, I talk to about climate change, like my really close friends, even my husband. And, they just do not want to take action.
Mhm.
One of my friends came to, we had a huge kind of climate cafe in Keene with all different kinds of churches and religious groups. And she came and, she didn't like it. So, I think there's just, she's this individual right now, she's so busy. And it made her maybe feel a little bit guilty that she wasn't doing anything. So maybe that's why Maria's saying that she doesn't want anybody to come out of there feeling bad
Mhm.
about anything. This is supposed to help you just, relieve some of that anxiety and see that you're not the only person that's worried about it. And I know we have lots of handouts so people can take action after, but there's not
Mhm.
really a big discussion except from the person that's giving the presentation.
Right.
I have a feeling that in a purely community-based meeting like that, as opposed to CCL, which has a whole organization behind it, I can see why she would say that because you could easily get into a situation where it would be that an argument about what kind of actions to take, what's most valuable, that kind of thing, and it would no longer be a safe space purely for the emotional component. People would then put up defenses that are more intellectual and try to justify their point of view, that kind of thing. And so I can see why you might not want to, or you might want to encourage people just to focus on the emotional part, which is really the content of that meeting, and
which could
postpone the other
actually
stuff. So
Yeah, that could actually be sharing. I mean, I get frustrated too. And, there's some such easy things to do, and people just, they might talk about being concerned about climate, but then they still do all these things. And why, that could be a way to talk. You wouldn't have to be saying you need to do A, B, and C. It could be, I'm feeling frustrated that people around me are living life as if fossil fuels are there forever. And,
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess my question would be, how many climate cafes are you going to have where you're just talking about emotion? Is there an end date? Do you have like 2 or 3? Because it's not like it's AA where you're supposed to do it for the rest of your life. Is it?
I don't
Or
know,
is it?
Keen's been having them every other month for more than a year.
Oh, really? And just
Yeah.
focused on feelings.
And well, they do have a presentation before, and then we'll have the circle. We go around twice and we only get to speak for a minute each time. It's very different from what Maria's doing. And I'm trying to think if I've been to a different climate cafe. Like, I don't know if I've been to one like Maria's been doing. That's why I asked her about the timing thing and people going too long talking about their topics. So
And what's the
Yeah.
presentations? Give an example.
We've had somebody come from League of Climate Voters, LCV, healthcare workers. We had the presentation of their slideshow about climate and health. Bruce, remind me, you've been there too. Let's talked. Shoot. I mean, oh, Dory Drackman came and talked about community power. So, it's just educating people about other things that are going on, like trying to get them to do a plastics one. They haven't done that yet. So, there's lots of topics. So, John, if you want to come and talk about carbon cashback, they'll probably be very happy about that.
Sign me up. I'd love
Patsy,
to.
do you have any sense of people then taking action as a result of what they've heard? Because that almost sounds like, we have these events where we just shove all this information at people, but we don't recognize the time they might need to process it and to internalize it and to come up with, their own decisions of what's next.
Yeah, but I just know that, I mean, most of the people there are doing something. There's a few women that are doing third act, and I haven't had time to get involved with that, but they're very good about taking action based on third act. And sometimes there's just, students from Keene State that come, and I know, and we don't see them again, because they're moving on to something else. So it's just hard to say.
I would think that it would feel manipulative for whoever's leading to say, well, let me tell you about carbon cashback, or, here's the agenda I have for you. After all of this, we want to hear your feelings. We're all open. We're non-judgmental. But I would hope.
Presentations first.
Pardon?
Presentations always
Right.
first.
Right. But sort of going back to the Maria model, or in any direction, that I would hope, as someone's talking about their concerns, their grief, whatever, that people in the group would initiate saying, this is what I felt, but then I discovered that action helps, or that it would be good or okay for the leader to say who has found some kind of action helpful. So that would be a way of opening up the topic of action without trying to steer people into a particular lane.
Yeah, I like that even better than where do you find hope? Like, what are you doing personally about it? Or maybe just a second question after, where do you find hope? Because there are good hope things showing that changes to reduce pollution are often for the better for a lot of reasons. But yeah, that's a good idea. What do you do to help? And then
Oh,
share what
But
they're
what if they
interested
don't? What if they're not? They're gonna feel bad. I don't think you
Well,
can
they'll,
ask that. Sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things I did is I bought an electric car, 6 years ago. So, and the other thing I did this year is I bought an electric lawnmower, battery powered. So every little thing you do counts. And the biggest thing is vote in November.
But see, in a climate cafe, Bruce, you would be there and you would share that. And other
Mhm.
people would go around and say
Does,
what
does.
they're doing. But so don't structure it in a way that people are afraid to say real actions. Or say it in some way, has anyone found that action helps? What, anything that they have done, so no one has to feel like shame if they don't.
I get confused that, the IPCC says we're going to fail to address climate change without pricing carbon. Uh, and there's this giant economist statement saying here's the most cost-effective, equitable way to do it. And it's just buried in all of the other stuff that people are doing about climate, and most people haven't even heard of it. I just, I'm, I'm trying to participate in this um, arena in an effective way, but I don't think I'm being very effective because there are so many people, even just in New Hampshire, that have never heard of it before. Um, and many of the people that are kind of the leaders, who other people look to, whether it's NHPR or Clean Energy New Hampshire, they're not even talking about it. I,
Well, John, you'll be happy to know that, I don't know, if it was the last Climate Cafe or the one before, John Condos was there. And the leader turned to me and said, Patsy, what are you doing? What do you think's a good idea? And I can't remember what I said. And John Condos was kind of laughing. And then he said, you're supposed to say, put a price on carbon, Patsy. So he got that in there and put me on the spot. So now I
yeah, well,
know what
John
to
Condos,
say.
I mean, it's tough. I love it for 3/4 of the time myself. John Condos has been in CCL longer than I have. Um, but it's just so weird that there's one solution that's half of solving the whole global problem and nobody's talking about it.
It's like, unless someone has given you permission, we gathered here tonight to talk about climate. You're not allowed to do it. I mean, to talk to someone in the grocery line, that's an act of hostility.
Well,
To
there's
mention it to my
energy
sister,
conferences,
that's an act of hostility. And
there's
so
clean
the
energy
same
conferences.
thing, when you
Right.
talk
But
to, what's her name, the carbon, the climate by degrees, that was an act of hostility. Those people were not ready to hear about it and they got angry at you. And I don't know how to cut through that.
she's the head of the climate desk of NPR, and she didn't want to talk about solutions. I don't know. I don't understand it either. Uh,
That's something that would be part of that climate cafe that would be helpful for those of us that are trying to make the changes, because I feel the same way about eating animal products. That makes, I mean, I believe in carbon fee and dividend too, but I believe that that's an action that's a sort of a no-brainer thing that would, but I do get very frustrated that everybody doesn't want to give up their steak, I guess. I don't know. But I think that would be something that would be helpful for people that are going to a climate cafe that feel like it's not having, what they're doing is not having the impact that they would like. And how do you do it better, which might be helpful for a lot of people. But it's kind of like talking about death. Nobody wants to talk about it. And then with the carbon cashback, God knows how the politics feed into that. And I mean, I don't know, I was a little confused. I love Sam Evans Brown, but he came to speak recently in my town and talked about how everything was great and so much is happening that's positive. And I'm thinking, what? I'm not seeing that. it's like the problem is almost solved. And I was really surprised at that. This is a recent change in his talks that he gives. Has anybody else heard him recently? No.
Not saying that.
Well, I hear
Um,
him on the legislative updates, and he talks about what's crummy.
Yeah. Well, this was a
But I mean,
different,
that's one little piece at a time.
well, who can be positive about the legislature? Sorry, but
yeah, that's tough.
this
But
was a community.
there is a strong faction, or I guess group that says we should be more positive about it, and that too much reality is not it's not good for the discussion. I don't know. I mean, I'm of two minds about it. I think we all probably are, but I
Yeah,
suspect that he made some kind of a decision to be positive in that particular
yeah.
uh, talk.
Yeah, and there are so many positive things happening, but like once a month I go check the Hawaii site with this carbon in the atmosphere and it never goes down. It's always up from last year. And I'm not going to be happy until I see that number go down. I'm going to check it every damn month and hope for the best.
No,
But
it's going up 3 or 4
much,
parts per million a year.
there's so much
There
good thing
is
happen.
there's a lot of modeling saying that this year or next year it's supposed to be peak emissions, and it's supposed to start to go down.
Peak
Uh,
emissions, but the CO2 concentration measured on Mauna Loa will keep going up for quite a while at our current
yeah,
pace.
definitely.
Because
Yeah.
So I should check once a year instead of once a month.
yeah, well, check in the check after May. After it hits the peak, you can watch it go down for 4 months.
Okay.
Don't look at it in April and May. It's very depressing.
Thanks.
I think they at the CCL conference, they were talking a lot about messaging. And if you're talking about death of the planet and climate catastrophe, you'll either have someone punch you in the nose or be too depressed to do anything.
And they'll give up.
Yeah, so you do have to balance it with like, is this true that worldwide 30% of our energy is now through renewable sources? I mean, if that's really true, that's pretty amazing. And, so we're headed in the right direction.
limited. I mean, that's limited to electricity generation, and I mean, it's not exactly what you might think. It's a little bit more limited than that, but yes, according to some measurements, that is correct at this point. Just
I
because
think
the
that
solar and wind has become so much less expensive than non-renewables.
in
Well, and
CCL's communications, that they're saying tie it to something local. It's changing. I'm worried about climate change. The less re the less stable the winters are concerns me because I like to ski. They say just bring it to something local that people close to you can connect to, so that you don't talk about the climate crisis and collapsing ecosystems and things, because that can push people away from thinking about it. But if you talk about something that they care about, these um, more days above 90 that we're having in New Hampshire are kind of okay if you have a lake, but if you don't have access to the lake, they're pretty tough. That kind of thing.
my kids
There's a
used to ski
certain
on the farm.
nuance that I would like to talk about sometime. I don't know that we have time now because we're getting to 7, but I mean, yeah, 7. Um, but there is actually some catastrophizing that goes on as well. Like people will talk about extinction of the human species and things like that, which actually is not in the books, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether what is more likely to happen is worse or better than that, but there is some unrealism, lack of realism on both sides of the argument, and that's unfortunate. And it's just the result of people not having opportunity to absorb some of the science. Actually, the science doesn't say that human species is at risk of extinction. It's more like, our social norms are at risk, our social structures and that kind of thing, which might be just as unpleasant. But anyway,
Humans
I
are
don't know how
so
to address that.
adaptable, right? We're so adaptable,
We're very adaptable, yeah.
unfortunately.
We are. Nature, not so much at the time, at the pace and scale that we're making the changes, though. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up to prepare for the New Hampshire Network Steering Committee meeting. Everybody's welcome to stay on for that. Must be 1 p.m. for Rhinemar now, or 1 a.m.
1 a.m. Yeah.
But thanks everybody for joining. This was this was a really good conversation. I'm going to try one of these in my library, I think, in the next couple of months.
John, thanks for
John,
sitting.
you're becoming an impressionist painting. I don't know whether the other people are seeing that. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
we
Your
are.
colors,
Let's have
I can
the
hardly
thunderstorm
recognize you
that
anymore.
went through our area over where he is. It's the thunder, lightning.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm
Great, well-
melting.
You're melting into something quite beautiful, though.
I told
Look
you
on
it
the
was
bright
getting
side.
too hot. Darn you, world.
Oh my
I just
Thanks,
God.
everybody.
Madame
I'll stop.
Tussauds on a hot day.
I just want to comment to say that more communities electric